Hello and welcome to the Procurement and Supply Chain Live London. I'm Neil Perry, Managing Editor at BizClick Media. Thank you for joining us here on the virtual stage. Right now we have a panel called Strategic Sourcing. So supply chains, they're complex systems, an organic interwoven chain of moving parts that's frankly is only good as its weakest link, as all of us all know. The human race has never had more information available at its fingertips. Supplier data, cost analysis, tool conditions, trading ebb and flow, staff scheduling, all of these things, every single tool you could possibly need to turn and run an effective supply chain. However, with a lot of data comes a lot of opportunities for misunderstanding and informational overload, and frankly, an awful lot of space for things to go wrong. So what steps can your business take to make sense of all of those resources at your disposal and create a truly well-oiled strategic sourcing system? Well, our panel of experts are discussing that now here on the virtual stage. So I'm joined on the virtual stage here today by Guillermo Walsh, who's Group Head of Procurement at Axiata. So Guillermo started his career in 1998 working for one of the operating companies of Millicom International Cellular in El Salvador. From there, Telemóvil revolutionized internet access by providing free dial-up internet access to El Salvador's population, when having internet access there was only for the very privileged in the country. So he progressed through that organisation. In 2011, joined the Vodafone procurement company in Luxembourg, where he managed the sales and procurement services for the partner market organisation. In 2019, joining one of the top management consulting firms to work on the T-Mobile US merger. And by the end of 2020, he moved to Kuala Lumpur, where he joined the group as the Group Head of Procurement for Axiata. So thank you for joining us, Guillermo. Also joining us, we have Lucia Cioffi, who's the SVP Chief Procurement Officer at Lego Group. So she has joined there, based out of Singapore. In this capacity, Lucia has responsibility for all the strategic and global procurement operations across the globe, leading an organisation of more than 200 people worldwide. Prior to joining Lego Group in 2014, Lucia played several leadership roles at the Dutch conglomerate Philips within sales, quality, procurement and cost management across a variety of business units, such as automotive, domestic appliances, personal care, consumer lifestyle and healthcare as well. So Lucia, thank you very much for joining us as well. We are in very safe hands, I think, here on the virtual stage. So let's jump right into things. Let's tackle the elephant in the room first, really. I guess the pandemic absolutely changed everything for everybody, brought changes no one thought was coming. But what challenges has your business dealt with over the past few years in response to the pandemic and disrupted those supply chains? And I'll absolutely put this out to both of you.
Well, I think all of us in procurement for the past 2.5 years have been dealing with all sorts of disruptions in the chain. And I think that was not different for the Lego Group either. So we dealt with COVID, all of us. And then we had natural disasters hitting us in Mexico, Texas. We had force majeure situations in Europe. Let's not forget the Suez Canal, right? That's something that also affected all of us. And then at a certain point, there was the rise of commodity demands and then the scarcity of availability due to lack of supply. So paper, resins, semiconductors, right? Where and still are in tight situations. So then gas situations, I think we can go on, inflation. We can go on for a while here talking about all those challenges that we've had. I think that was no different for the Lego Group. And on top of that, what we had was a very strong growth in the Lego Group. And therefore, we were not only challenged by the situation and making sure that we had continuity of supply, but we also had to support the growth. We successfully managed to do so. And I must say, for me, the most important point back then was the focus that the teams had, fantastic teams, and the extreme collaboration that we had within the chain. I think the primary objective was continuity of supply, but at the same time, we never lost long-term strategic focus. Because if you get caught into the day-to-day, then you lose your strategic focus. But we didn't. We managed to continue, and we continued our journey in innovation. We continued our journey in digitalization, in sustainability, and so on. So that's basically what we've been dealing with for the past 2.5 years. And I'm pretty sure that it's not very different, probably, Guillermo, I don't know, for you. Probably very similar situation, isn't it?
Thank you. So we actually have a different set of challenges. I'm in the telecommunications industry, so we're not manufacturing. Um, so we actually have been dealing with a long period of low growth in revenue. The population globally has slowed down, growth has slowed down. With the pandemic, we also have the challenge of GDPs going down, so there's a decrease in GDPs. Profitability has been stagnant for a few years in our industry. And this is basically because we're a very capital intense business and we are carrying a lot of capital investments in the balance sheet that we need to depreciate. Also, the frequencies, the spectrum that we acquire from the governments in all the operations. And we have a declining ROI, mainly driven by an increase on capital intensity in the last couple of years. We're moving between technologies, so we have different, let's say, like a 5 to 7 year technology cycle. We're going to be moving now into 5G era in our markets as well. So this is going to be driving a lot of capital investment, and therefore our ROI is decreasing. So quite a challenging environment, I will say. I wish I had the growth that Lucia is having, but nevertheless, we're also doing our part, and I think yeah, we're navigating through the challenging times.
But from what you've both said there, picking up on that, is I guess the main takeaway most people could have is what you said a little bit there, Lucia, is not being totally wrapped up in the day to day. Yes, you have to maintain a certain standard and a certain level, but you don't want to lose that forward thinking. How important was that? How difficult was that when, frankly, everything was going on and all of these totally unexpected things? Because it's easy to forget how extraordinary the situation was.
And I like that you use the past tense, because to me, that's not entirely past. I mean, some of those challenges are in the past. Many of those challenges are in the past, but there are new challenges ahead. And honestly, I do firmly believe, Neil, that resilience, working on resilience, is something that is there to stay, and it's there to stay for the long term. So if you look at what we have done and what we are dealing with, right? What procurement those days is dealing with, whether you're in manufacturing or not, you're dealing with inflation, and you're dealing with the start, the beginning signs, or the signs of recession. So there's a lot of things and a lot of challenges there that are still there. Gas situation in Europe, energy situation in general, labor increases, all those things are not in the past. Let me put it this way. But I do believe that if you look at what did we do in the beginning, it's also a little bit different than what we are doing today, right? So what we did in the beginning in order to counter was mainly juggling all sorts of priorities to start with on a daily basis, and trying to close holes wherever they were. Then we built up a control tower, and we had absolute full focus of all teams on execution. That's what we did, right? But you cannot do something like that for the longer term, because at a certain point, people need support. You cannot create that type of workload on a daily basis for a very long period of time. So what we did was we built up control towers. We looked at embedding resiliency practices basically in our daily life, in tools, in processes, and so on. And then we made sure that we had a road ahead where everybody could see the strategic intent and what procurement was going to achieve on the longer term beyond the day-to-day fights. I think that was an extremely crucial point, because let's not forget that if we succeed in something, it's because of the people that make it happen, right? And it is extremely important that people feel part of that, of contributing to something that is in the long term. Then I think there is a light, a guiding light, a direction set in the front that takes also this day-to-day fighting, puts it in a different perspective.
Well, Lucia, you mentioned there a little bit about resilience, and that's really where I wanted to take the conversation next, because this is something everyone can take so much out of. It's such an important part of the operation. So what steps have you taken, and this is very much for both of you, to try and become more resilient to these kind of disruptions and spikes in demand, and how can we make sure our supply chain resilience is there in such uncertain times? I'll go to you first, Guillermo, on this one.
Thank you. So we have done a few things, but I think that the three main changes that we did recently was procurement now is embedded in the budgeting cycle, and that gives us the ability to look ahead into the into the LRP, see what's coming, and it gives us the opportunity to plan ahead. And this, I think, is very it's definitely a requirement. If you want to have resilience, you need to be able to plan ahead. The second one is we're now being part of the capital allocation process, where having a limited amount of resources, the company now is able to challenge the different operating companies on their projects, and we can prioritize depending on where the best returns are, which projects go and which projects don't go. And because we have visibility of this cycle, we are now able to consolidate. Actually, 1 year ago, we were able to finally consolidate the demand of the whole group, which was a challenge because originally the company was operating very decentralized. And now we're able to finally leverage the scale of the group. So I think those are the three key elements that we have done in terms of achieving resilience going forward.
Lucia?
Yeah, and I think from my side, as I was mentioning, in the beginning, it was juggling all, these balls in the air, and then we started embedding practices in tools, in processes, in systems. We created this control tower. I think what made the difference was the collaboration across the chain, because what we did was we had very short decision paths, and we could take decisions very fast. We were really seamlessly collaborating throughout the chain, making fast decisions, but without any compromise on quality. So we've always supported each other throughout the different functions in the chain, and we've managed to counter a lot of challenges, and we've managed to support the growth. Then, of course, there is the things that you do more on the midterm, like increasing multiple sourcing, because that's you have a lot of multiple sourcing, but is that enough? So you start looking at your supply base. But I think what needs to happen now, and what I'm presently working on together with my team, is looking into the future, knowing that resilience is there to stay. It's not something that is going to go away so easily. We're looking at shedding light on the supply chain beyond our tier one suppliers. So wherever there is, working on identifying really what are the neuralgic points in the chain, and then intervene surgically into those points in order to create mitigations.
Well, to give you an example. Oh, go ahead. Yes. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, just to give you an example, if you think of packaging, right, then you're thinking of paper packaging, and you have suppliers of packaging around the world in different regions. Different technologies. So for the same technology, you have multiple sources. You think you're done. You think you're covered. And then if you start looking underneath and you start going down, you find that some of the sources of paper are the same. So if anything goes wrong in those sources, your multiple supply base is not going to help you. This is just to give an example of of what I'm referring to, but I think there are several points. We cannot cover everything. It is impossible and also not the intent to cover everything, but you can identify really neuralgic points that are going to be to help you mitigate risk.
Oh, that is a fantastic example, and you've led me on beautifully to where I wanted to take things next, and that is talking about relationships with suppliers, because we've talked about some of the challenges that we've seen in recent years. We've talked about resilience and how we can try and deal with some of those challenges, but a key part of this is the chain. It is the suppliers, it is the people we're working with day to day to make what we do happen. How has all of that affected the way we deal with suppliers, and how is this going to have a lasting impact, I suppose, on the relationships with suppliers going forward? I'll start with you, Guillermo, on that one.
Thank you. So this has definitely changed the way we work with suppliers, and in our industry, there's only a handful of vendors that do what we do here in terms of network kits. So we have deliberately selected to work with a handful of vendors. Now, because we're able to consolidate all the demand, we get that power to consolidate, and we're focusing on collaborative sourcing relationships. So basically, what's going on is we have moved away from nickel and diming the supplier base to actually understand the system economics. So how is all this system working together, and we have aligned strategy and goals with these few vendors, with the ultimate goal of delivering the lowest cost of the system. And we see that the way we're working now is we have gone away from traditional RFPs. We're not doing that anymore. And we're basically managing 80% of the spend with 3 to 4 vendors, and it's working well. And this is giving us the cost certainty and the long-term relationship that we need to keep this business going. So I think that is here to stay, and that is a conscious decision that we took, which is work with a very limited number of suppliers that can deliver competitive pricing, high quality, and efficient delivery. And that's what we're going to be working on going forward too.
Lucia, do you be in agreement with that, about how those relationships with the suppliers have changed?
Yeah, I think I understand where Guillermo is coming from from his business. I think, true partnerships are seen in the moments of need and in the difficult moments. And I think we saw strengthening of our supplier relationships, of our relationships with our partners during the harder times. I think that's one of the things that, maybe I can highlight as one of the things that came out most during this period of time.
I suppose it was some unexpected benefits. You really knew a little bit more about people. You learned more about people in the difficult times, I suppose. But if we move on to some of the words you were using there, Guillermo, about efficiency, effective. That's the dream, isn't it? You want it to be efficient, effective, high quality. But bring all of those things together, often much easier to say than do. So, Lucia, I'll start with you on this one. What are the key aspects of making sure that our sourcing strategy is that it is efficient and it is effective for the intended purpose?
I think the most important thing, and here I'm going to be very controversial.
Feel free. I love that on the virtual stage.
Don't write a procurement strategy for the sake of writing a procurement strategy. You're going to have a wonderful PPT, and that's it. I think the most important thing is that the strategy is part of a bigger company plan. And you play a role in realizing the company plan. So the strategy is for me not as a rigid set of rules, but it's a direction, right? And it's a direction that you give to people where they can see their contribution. So it's important to make sure that when you set up a strategy, you are having a clear sharing, testing your strategic assumptions cross-functionally, because your goals and objectives, if they are only yours and they are not shared, and then do not contribute to the bigger objective of the company, then you're going to have difficulties in realizing it. Because whatever you need to do in procurement, you need the support of your stakeholders, you need the support of the people around you. If you are part of driving a strategy that goes into the bigger picture into the bigger company strategy, then you will have higher chances of realizing and of contributing to the plan of what your company is trying to achieve. So I think this is for me extremely important. I don't believe in strategies that just foster functional excellence for the sake of functional excellence. Functional excellence should be there in the areas where the company needs you. And I think the nowadays, given the fact that we live in an extremely volatile world, the suggestion that I would give is make sure that you are working on scenarios, that you're looking at different scenarios and you have some form of scenario planning, scenario analysis, so that once you are creating strategy, especially for sourcing purposes, you are taking into consideration how scenarios can develop in the best and worst case. I'm talking about geopolitical scenarios, geographical, sustainability, evolutions, and the like, so that you are able to analyze, look at how you would act in the different scenarios, and maybe find common approaches for several scenarios that can bring you forward. I think those are the key points that I would give for an efficient and effective sourcing strategy.
Guillermo?
Yeah, so I think, in my opinion, one of the things that any procurement professional should, really strive for is having good and reliable data. So I think always make sure that you invest in having a good set of data to work on. That goes along with the scenario analysis that Lucia was mentioning. You need to make sure that you have the right information to play with. Always have alternatives. If you don't have an alternative, that's going to bite you. So make sure that you have alternatives. And I think one that is sometimes not obvious, but is a no-brainer, I think, is make sure you tap into the R&D of the suppliers. They most likely, at least in our industry that we operate, they have more firepower in R&D that we could ever be able to do on our own. So most of the innovation in our industry is coming from the suppliers. So you need to make sure that you keep listening to that and that you take that in. It's free. You need to make sure you listen to them, and then you can utilize that. So I think those will be the three things that I will mention here.
Okay, and Lucia, you were mentioning about scenarios there, having plans for some of the worst things, and at the moment we've got some of those things happening as we speak. Really, we've had the disruptions driving up demand for raw materials and inflating the value of goods and services. How can any procurement professional who's watching and listening to this ride out all the current inflationary waves we're having and any potential economic deflation? How can they ride out these kind of situations from your experience?
I wish I had the perfect recipe for that. I think, Neil, what we in procurement, we are expected to be on top of the wave. We're expected to ride the wave and to ride it accordingly, whether it's up or down, right? I think my suggestion is to increase your market intelligence, go beyond the classic indicators of the market that you've been looking at up to this moment, expand that. There's much more indicators out there, labor, of course, energies, gas, oil, and so on. And of course, those that you have never thought were absolutely relevant for you, they start playing a much more important role, and they will give you the opportunity to better understand the markets and to better understand how those indicators are going to affect you. I think that's the important thing, is increase your market intelligence and then build stronger cost transparency. When you do both of those and you understand how your costs are being affected, then you can immediately act as soon as you see changes coming. So you're measuring the pulse of the market, you are increasing your transparency in the cost, and you are acting as soon as the wave hits. I think these are the main points. Easy to say, not easy to do.
Always, as you say, no perfect recipe. Guillermo, I'll come to you on that one quickly. If you can make it a fairly succinct answer, it'd be appreciated. We've still got a couple of questions to squeeze in from some of our viewers ahead of this virtual session, which we want to try and fit in before we finish. So if you can try and give us your perfect recipe for that, that'd be very appreciated.
Sure. So luckily, or maybe not so luckily, because we actually did the hard work. We've been working on this for a few years now. We believe that we did the work already. And I got the question recently by somebody in the company, and they were saying, how is this going to affect us? And then the answer was, well, it won't. Like we were able to work on these strategic partnerships and long-term agreements way ahead of time. So if you're trying to sort of navigate out of this in the moment, it's going to be difficult. Like you need to be building this. So I think luckily we did it. So that's one. But obviously there are other things that will affect us. For example, we're exposed to the Forex. So we most of these contracts are in dollars, and we actually generate different currencies, not dollars. And these currencies are getting depreciated. We have issues in Sri Lanka, for example. But we're exploring with our partners how to face these challenges. But I think the answer is you need to work ahead. You need to be 2 steps ahead. There's no perfect recipe, like Lucia says. You just need to keep doing the hard work.
Absolutely right. We need to just push on very quickly to a couple of questions we had ahead of time on this from our audience. So we can keep these answers relatively quick. That would be appreciated, just so we can wrap up in time. First one, Guillermo, for you. How do you feel about the response from the telecoms industry in general and how they dealt with the pandemic?
I think the response has been good. I think the networks overall globally had enough capacity. The telco industry had been building for a while, and actually the pandemic accelerated a lot of the trends or changes that we needed to do. Probably you I don't know if you've heard, but in many of the countries, 3G and even 2G is being shut down completely, which is because it's a result of the pandemic, because of the need of deploying more efficient spectrum technologies like 4G and 5G. So I think the industry was prepared to manage the pandemic. We were not so much affected by the semiconductor crunch yet. It might still come. I mean, there's geopolitics in game. There's US against China that is playing out now. We don't know what that could be, but as I said again, make sure you have alternatives. So I think overall the telco industry was well prepared to face the pandemic challenges and actually enable the world to navigate out of the pandemic through the telecommunication services.
Okay, and one last quick question for you, Lucia. That's despite an increase in all the disruptions globally, which we've already touched on, the Lego Group managed to not only survive, but thrive. What do you think has been the secret to Lego's success there?
Well, I think part of it was due to the fact that in the beginning, people were staying inside a lot, so there was a lot of demand growing. But with demand growing, also came a huge responsibility for the Lego Group to be able to satisfy that demand, and also, of course, make sure that the brand that now comes into the hands of many more people all of a sudden also stays in the hands of many more people. And I think that together as a company, the Lego Group managed to do so.
Fantastic. I know Lego was actually a part of my homeschooling. I was doing all the homeschooling from home, and I was getting them to dig into the box of Lego, build something, and then draw it. So that was often a very good way of keeping them quiet for half an hour if I had a video call to do. It was genius. So personal thanks to you and all of your colleagues for that. Guillermo, Lucia, thank you so much. That is all the time we have for on the virtual stage for this particular panel discussion. Thank you, Lucia, Guillermo, for joining us. And thank you for watching at home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we hope you are enjoying Procurement and Supply Chain Live today. If you have missed anything, remember to take a look at the app, look at the all of our social feeds as well to catch up on everything that you might have missed. There's so much going on over these 2 days, and do stay tuned for more great content.